I support this motion, having moved one similar myself, seeking documents related to the algal bloom, which the government then duly provided after the winter break in a significant period of time. I note that when those documents were tabled, for the ecologists who had lobbied me to put that motion before this chamber, the information was still substandard. It did not include all of the requested phytoplankton counts, even though the government had argued commercial incompetence to already restrict what that particular motion asked for. And also of incredible concern, the documents were incorrect. The documents detail that in Boatswain Point in the southeast, in March, there had been identified brevetoxins and the algal bloom had seemed to be in that location. Now that certainly added up with the local shark fishermen who had already been raising in the media, in the ABC, and I'm sorry, if you're going to debate this, please just do it so I can actually hear myself think here. This is really important. The government actually got the last lot of documents wrong, and then they had to come into this place and very quietly slip in a correction. Now that correction was around the data collected at Boatswain Point, which the government now claims was all a clerical error, and yet in Boatswain Point and around the southeast, the local fisherman had been raising the alarm about the impact on his catch, which was non-existent in that March period, the fact that he had identified foam, the fact that he had identified dead fish in the sea at an unusual rate. So I do question what happened to create that clerical error that in that first tranche of documents seemed to back up what the local fishermen had been telling, not just the department, but of course the ABC, and is well documented by the ABC in that time frame. These documents, I think, are incredibly important, and I do commend the Liberal Party for seeking to use the parliamentary processes to gain the information that South Australians are seeking with regards to this harmful algal bloom. The government at the moment can't have it both ways. They can't claim that there's misinformation out there when they refuse to release full information that in fact feeds into further misinformation. And I draw members' attention to the submission made to the Senate algal bloom inquiry by ecologist Faith Coleman, who has been variously quoted in recent weeks in this place. But her contribution to the Senate inquiry goes to commend, and quite rightly so, the way citizen scientists have stepped into the breach where there has been a dearth of information to inform our understanding of what is going on with this harmful algal bloom. In fact, it has been heartbreaking as she's watched, particularly those in the fishing industry, but others as well, go to the wall, literally, to lose their income, including that shark fisher down in the southeast. He, of course, is not able to apply for any of the government compensation packages because the government says that he has not been affected by the harmful algal bloom, despite, as I say, his loss of catch, observation of, in that area, in that March period, the discoloured water and the foam and the dead fishes, and the fact that he wasn't getting any catch. He's been told he doesn't qualify because the data that the government has released and put forward doesn't see him as affected. And yet what has happened there? You have to ask that question. Ecologist Faith Coleman, in her submission to the Senate inquiry, has commended the actions of the public. And indeed, she has worked and trained up many citizen scientists, and through platforms such as iNaturalist, but a whole range of them, our local community has really stepped up here. They have understood watching this devastating impact, that they are perfectly capable of collecting their own data, forming their own networks of knowledge with independent scientists, and collectively deciding the most appropriate ways forward for themselves. Why? Because there was a dearth of data being released by the government. Once the community felt heard or supported from others within that community, individual and community concern regarding the impacts on socio-economic factors and marine ecosystems, the sky does in fact seem to be the limit to what can be done outside of government and academia, Ms Coleman relates. Indeed, she commends the community's willingness to learn and change in an attempt to protect this key aspect of South Australia's identity and sense of self, and it gives hope. What does not give hope, and as Faith Coleman outlines in her Senate submission, is the opposite: the coordination of state government responses, including agency responsibility, industry engagement, scientific advice and public communications. She writes to that committee, the South Australian government was slow to respond. I think that one is accepted even among agencies, but it is easy to have 2020 vision when looking backwards in time. It was clearly a case of being caught off guard and unprepared. This situation was not a matter of not being warned, but in some ways it was a matter of our decision makers having been warned too much. As an elderly academic mentor said, who rang me when he first heard of this bloom in interstate media, it is funny, Faith, it is as if we, the scientists, have so long been saying that these events will happen, the decision makers completely missed it when we started saying, it's here. Ms Coleman goes on to also reflect on the adequacy, or indeed the inadequacy, of long-term monitoring, forecasting and prevention strategies, noting that the Seafood Safety Program does undertake a wide range of phytoplankton counts and related monitoring. However, the industry sponsorship of this program means that the data is presented in a way that is of very little use as an ecologist and generally not available for wider access and analysis. Taking this program out of industry hands, sharing the data fully and making it a government-run program that looks at the broader phytoplankton ecology in these areas would be beneficial for all. Not only is it likely that the aquaculture industry would benefit from a better understanding of what their animals are eating, but as a state we would have a better appreciation of what drives healthier aquaculture, the loading capacity that is appropriate in each area, suitable complementary uses of our aquatic estate and the number of troublesome bloom events we are currently dealing with. Ms Coleman indeed does reflect that it has been deeply disappointing and deeply disturbing that we've had to push so hard to get the little information we currently do have. And in her recommendations to that Senate committee, she states at recommendation 4, we need to collectively monitor and publicise the impacts of marine heatwaves and phytoplankton health, enabling us to provide rapid responses to community concerns regarding our marine zones, separate from aquaculture and aquacultural specialists. And I couldn't agree more. What we do need here is more transparency, not less, and a parliament and a house that is certainly meant to be a house of review that is not obsequious to claims that apparently the department can't handle the provision of information, when this is the department we expect to handle the harmful algal bloom. Now, if they can't actually provide the information about it, how on earth are they even going to tackle the problems that are besetting us? We are not here as members of parliament to simply wave things through for the government of the day. We are here to hold them to account, and this motion is quite a reasonable way of doing so. Indeed, it gives 7 sitting days for the government to provide this information, not just to this council, but of course this chamber, but for the public, for the scientists, for the community, for those whose industries are affected, and in a way that perhaps like the last release of data, when it is viewed by those with expertise, issues such as that happened with the last release of algal bloom data can be identified by the experts in the field and perhaps corrected by the government again. And perhaps we will see more documents tabled as erratums or addendums or corrections when these observations are able to be made by those outside of government. 7 sitting days is not 7 calendar days. It is not even 7 business days. It is in fact the end of November this year, the final official sitting week of this year, and indeed possibly of this parliament. It is the last possible week that we could reasonably expect this data to be provided in a way that is actually respectful of democracy and actually going to inform proper democratic debate. We have an optional sitting week the following week, but that is not guaranteed, and we know that. What is guaranteed, however, are the numbers in this place. That is, the government has not for many, many decades held the numbers in this place, and indeed we do control our own destiny. And I would say that if the government can't comply with this motion in a timely way, then perhaps the parliament needs to sit next year. Perhaps this chamber needs to be coming back in late January or early February to ensure that this is able to be complied with in terms of the very simple and very practical and very reasonable request for this harmful algal bloom data to be provided, as I say, not just for this institution of the Parliament, but for the people of South Australia. This situation comes about through a lack of distrust in the current government's handling of this matter. That is, they have been slow to act, and then they have obfuscated. I am still waiting for the Minister for Primary Industries to respond to a question many months ago now about when brevetoxins were first detected in this state. When I raised it as a supplementary follow-up question many months later, she said that we hadn't hit the official time for that question to have been responded to yet. The government is playing games with the data on the algal bloom. The government is playing games with the data on brevetoxins, which had never been detected in our state before. They are willing to use sophistry and every trick in the political book that it takes to try and keep this out of an election agenda. The reality is there will be an election in March 2026. The government should actually be demonstrating the leadership that the people of South Australia want right now in providing this sort of information so that the public can have restored trust in this government, because, my goodness, it's taken a hit in the last few months. And certainly in this chamber, I would hope that we will be doing and taking our responsibilities to hold this government to account seriously and to ensure that we have the full information that should be provided in a way that, should there be errors in it, they can be addressed and questioned and called out, in a way, if there are areas of concern in it, that they can be debated in this place. But for the government to claim that they can't even provide the information about the harmful algal bloom within a timely way, and that we need to give them a deadline into the nether, really, at this point, it is a bit rich. It really, really is. If you want the public not to believe in misinformation, you actually need to provide the information and do so in a timely manner. Otherwise, how on earth can we trust this government?